It is time for this war to end, and end in a way where Israel is secure, all the hostages are released, the suffering of Palestinians in Gaza ends, and the Palestinian people can exercise their right to freedom, dignity, and self-determination. There has been hopeful movement in the talks to secure an agreement on this deal. And as I just told Prime Minister Netanyahu, it is time to get this deal done.
So Vice President Kamala Harris met with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu yesterday after declining to attend his address to Congress. Bibi also separately met with President Joe Biden. And there's been a lot of speculation about how her policy towards Israel would be different than Biden's, who has largely avoided criticizing Israel's actions in Gaza and has continued to send them weapons. Harris started her remarks by reconfirming her unwavering commitment to the existence of the state of Israel. And she said that she would continue to help Israel defend itself. But she also said that how Israel defends itself matters. And she spoke to the disastrous humanitarian crisis in Gaza. Take a look at this.
I also expressed with the Prime Minister my serious concern about the scale of human suffering in Gaza, including the death of far too many innocent civilians. And I made clear my serious concern about the dire humanitarian situation there, with over 2 million people facing high levels of food insecurity, and 500,000 people facing catastrophic levels of acute food insecurity. What has happened in Gaza over the past 9 months is devastating. The images of dead children and desperate, hungry people fleeing for safety, sometimes displaced for the second, third, or fourth time. We cannot look away in the face of these tragedies. We cannot allow ourselves to become numb to the suffering, and I will not be silent.
Well, she is right. The crisis in Gaza gets more and more dire every single day. According to Palestinian health authorities, Israel's ground and air campaign in Gaza has killed more than 39,000 people, mostly civilians, and driven most of the enclave's 2.3 million people from their homes. Kamala then turned to the ceasefire and hostage deal that's currently on the table and said it was time to get the deal done to end the war. She also said that she remains committed to eventually achieving a two-state solution. So, Anna, what do you think? Is she trying to play both sides here? She's already doing a better job at acknowledging the deaths in Palestine than Joe Biden ever did. But regardless, is this still just the status quo?
Hey, don't scroll away. Come back. Because before the video continues, we just want to urge you to lend your support to TYT. You power our honest reporting. You do it at tyt.com/team, and we love you for it.
There's really no indication that she would be different in terms of policy. Certainly, she's a little better rhetorically speaking, and drawing some attention to the pain and suffering of the Palestinian people in Gaza is an important thing to do. And I think that Biden had trouble doing that. But to be fair to Biden, he had trouble messaging on pretty much everything. And so Kamala Harris, yes, did a good job there. But when you look into the influences in her life, namely her husband, who is, very proud to declare himself a Zionist, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. I'm not saying that's indicative of someone who's going to be needlessly cruel to Palestinians, but his focus in every comment that he's made publicly since Kamala Harris became the presumptive nominee indicates to me that he's very much in favor of protecting Israel and doing so to the detriment of Palestinians. What gives me a little bit of hope is that apparently Kamala Harris's stepdaughter talks about the plight of Palestinians and brings that up during Seder, wants to change or influence US policy as it pertains to Israel and how they're prosecuting this war. I don't know how much influence her stepdaughter has on her, but there's one thing that I'll mention that I think is super important. And it's the influence of people like Anthony Blinken in the Biden administration that Kamala Harris is poised to get rid of. And that is a good sign. So Anthony Blinken is an individual who, after working for the Obama administration, founded a consulting firm called West Exec consultants. And the way that this consulting firm is structured is they can literally have foreign clients without having to disclose that they have foreign clients, right? So they don't have to ever register as foreign agents. They don't have to disclose that they've worked with foreign clients. A former US ambassador to Israel was also part of this consulting firm. And I'm telling you all of this because I have no doubt in my mind that these are individuals who worked with Israel as one of their foreign clients. And I think that that's also one of the influences behind Avril Haines, who also worked at this consulting firm, coming out and alleging without a single shred of evidence that Iran is funding the pro-Palestinian protesters here in the United States. Kamala Harris getting rid of these individuals from her White House, should she, win the presidency, would be a major improvement in my mind. I mean, obviously it depends on who she replaces these individuals with, but I was concerned about the Anthony Blinkens and the Avril Haines as soon as Biden had nominated them for his administration. And so we'll see how this all plays out. But in terms of her rhetoric, obviously, she's very clear that she's unwavering in her support and commitment to Israel. And I think that rhetoric is damning because, okay, but what is the government made up of in Israel? If they're far-right extremists, you're gonna unwaveringly support the far-right extremists or extremist government of Israel? It doesn't make much sense to me. So we'll see what happens, but I have a little bit of hope, not much. What do you think, Waz?
You guys will be shocked to learn that my enthusiasm for this Kamala Harris thing has done nothing but diminish as the day goes by. And honestly, watching that statement is just perfect. She is going to be a way better Democratic Party politician than Joe Biden. She's gonna say the right things. She's gonna look really polished in the process of doing it. But she's gonna do like nothing for anybody of substance. Like in all of that speech, at no point did she say she'd be willing to lift a finger to achieve said outcome. Right? Like she said, we want a ceasefire. We want the war to stop. We want to bring the hostages home, yada, yada, yada. At no point did she say, and we'd be willing to go here to see this. We'd be willing to stop with the weapons. We'd be willing to stop funding. We'd be willing to crack a whip on the Israeli government, who is allegedly our partners and our allies. We'd be willing to actually, wield some influence over them to achieve this end that I claim to want to see. That's the bad part, right? To me, she just said a whole bunch of nothing up there. The good thing is, yes, she said she's already leaked. She's gonna fire all of Biden's foreign policy people, which was very heartening. Another thing is, if you follow this foreign policy stuff even a little bit, you know that there are like sort of factions. Like none of these people in the foreign policy establishment are like us, who just want to end all of these wars and like focus on what's happening at home. But there is, if you want to use the word left part of that faction, right? Like the Ben Rhodeses, for instance, he was Obama's foreign policy guy. And right now, Kamala Harris's foreign policy advisor is somebody who comes from the Ben Rhodes side of thinking, right? These are the guys that were like, look, we're not trying to suck up to Saudi Arabia. We don't want to just let Israel dictate terms to us all day. And they got killed for 8 years because of this. Ben Rhodes famously coined the term the blob, right? Like in reference to, like all of these lobbyists and the foreign policy establishment in Washington. And so that's a nice thing to hear. But this statement, man, I don't know, man. It makes me feel like she's just gonna be the greatest Democrat ever. Talk, and do nothing for anybody.
Yeah. I think it's also important to remember that she hasn't actually secured the nomination yet. So there is kind of a balancing act that she has to play. We'll see how, the difference between what her rhetoric is now prior to winning the nomination, prior to winning the presidency, if it comes to that in November, versus what she ends up doing with her cabinet and with her policies if and when she's elected. But unsurprisingly, she's already done a lot, right? Benjamin Netanyahu was reportedly very irked by Kamala Harris's public remarks following their meeting. Here is his excuse. This is reporting from Barak Ravid at Axios. He said, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu was upset by Vice President Kamala Harris by her on-camera statements after their meeting and is concerned it will harm the negotiations over a Gaza hostage and ceasefire deal, an Israeli official said in a briefing with reporters. But it seems like the Israeli government is just upset that she called them out publicly. It goes on to say that the Israeli official said Netanyahu and his team were caught off guard by Harris's on-camera statement and taken aback by its tone, which they said sounded much more critical than Biden's. So it sounds like they got a little comfortable there. Yeah.
Well, I'm sorry, I'm chomping at the bit. This guy is used to American politicians getting on their knees and filleting him before the American people. And he can't fathom that anyone would call out, she didn't even call it war crimes or anything like that. But he can't fathom anyone, any US politician talking about the plight and the suffering and the brutality that Palestinians have been experiencing, not just during this war, but for many, many decades now. And so I don't care how hurt his feelings are. And no one should believe for a second that Netanyahu has ever engaged in ceasefire negotiations in good faith. He has not. And there's literally nothing that Kamala Harris can do to offend him to a point where he would go from engaging in good faith to no longer engaging in good faith, because he never engaged in good faith to begin with. Okay, he doesn't want a ceasefire because a ceasefire would mean an end to the war, and an end to the war would mean getting prosecuted for the corruption charges he's facing. It would mean that the Israeli people who despise him, 72% according to polls, want him out. They would push him out of government. And by the way, the support that he's currently getting from the extremists in his coalition government would immediately pull back their support if he actually did agree to a ceasefire agreement. So there is no indication that Netanyahu wants to end this war. And in fact, all of the incentives point in the direction of him prolonging this war, prolonging the suffering and the deaths of innocent Palestinian civilians in Gaza.
Yeah, it just becomes a matter of like, how much longer can we go? Because for the people living over there, every day is a nightmare. And this has been going on for months already. But to your point, Anna, one Israeli official did claim that Harris's statement after the meeting was much more critical than what she told Netanyahu in the meeting. And then the Israeli official said Netanyahu was upset about the fact that Harris spoke about the hostage and ceasefire deal as an end to the war, while Israel maintains its position that it will be able to resume the fighting after the deal is implemented. So Netanyahu was also angry that Harris criticized Israel for the humanitarian crisis in Gaza and for killing civilians. I guess it makes sense that he's upset about that. But meanwhile, Netanyahu is scheduled to meet at Mar-a-Lago today with Donald Trump, who he is less likely to get any public pushback from. So why is Netanyahu meeting with a private citizen? Who knows? I don't know. But Bibi is bold and he's manipulative and unapologetic in the most delusional and destructive way, really. If Harris wins in November, she's going to have to work with this guy while somehow fostering peace for the Palestinians. But Israel is saying, even once we get our hostages back, we're still going to keep bombing the Palestinians and just let us. I can't believe she won't let us. Waz, let's start with you. What do you make of this?
I mean, why would they believe anything other than that? All the kids and their freaking blown off limbs all over social media, all over people's timelines and feeds. That didn't do it. They bombed the hell out of a refugee camp the other month. That didn't do it. They bombed the hell out of Jose Andres's, humanitarian aid trucks. They killed some Westerners in the process. That didn't do it. Like, no matter what they do, they keep getting aid and weaponry and support. So like, why would he think that anything would come in the way of his objective to just keep finding stuff to bomb? That because it's obvious there's no actual military operation or objective being executed here. They're just finding new things to bomb. They're not engaging with some army out in a war zone. They're just finding places to bomb and pretending that they're making progress.
That's such a good point. And let me just say, anytime Benjamin Netanyahu or any of these other extremists in the Israeli government purport to care about the hostages, Just remember the fact that he came onto US soil and demanded that American taxpayers not only fund the bombs that he is terrorizing said hostages with in Gaza, but that we do so faster. Okay, that's what Netanyahu said. He doesn't care about the hostages. He doesn't care about the Israeli people. He failed in keeping them safe. And he certainly doesn't care about the lives of the Palestinian children who are getting blown to smithereens thanks to his foreign policy and his actions in Gaza. He's a disgusting human being. He is not engaging in ceasefire negotiations in good faith. And as long as we allow for moneyed interests to have sway and influence over our politicians, nothing is going to change in regard to US policy toward Israel. That AIPAC money is super influential. Our politicians are absolute cowards. And that was on full display during that joint session of Congress as Netanyahu was giving that speech, standing up over and over again, clapping like trained seals toward a
John Fetterman wore a suit.
He wore a suit.
He wore a suit.
Yeah.
He wore a suit to honor his Lord and Savior, Bibi Netanyahu. It was embarrassing, dude.
Thanks for watching The Young Turks. Really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR. So those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.